Thank you, PJ. It is time for another edition of the Pair and a Spare podcast. I'm Justin Gaard from The Fan. We've got Ryan Burns from Gopher Illustrated. And as he tells us, right below his chin, from Football Across America, because he can't get it off of his description, Chip Scoggins
Minnesota.
from the Star Tribune. And we're presented by Jack's Cafe, jackscafe.com. Of course, we appreciate them. I want to talk about memories made by Jack's Cafe with the ticket giveaway last weekend, which was phenomenal. But this congratulations, Chip, that I was going to start the show with today has double meaning now, given that we see that you don't know how to get Football Across America or Football Across Minnesota off of your display name. No. If people are watching on YouTube, I want to congratulate you for finding Peacock on Saturday and being able to watch the Gophers rout Rhode Island and being able to find Peacock. Take us inside the Scoggins household and how you pulled that off, Boomer.
Well, I got my wife was gone, but I got clear instructions on how to do it before she left. So she walked me through it. I didn't have to jot it down. I still remembered it. But yeah, my scroll says, so in football season, I do this weekly column, Football Across Minnesota. And this year 4, we're starting. We added just like a video component. I talked to Mike Rand for 5 minutes, just kind of preview what's in it. And he changed my log or the name
display
thing.
Name. Yeah.
Display name.
Thing. Yep.
Yeah. And he put Football Across Minnesota, just kind of,
yeah,
a little
pump it up.
I didn't know it was going to stay there. Like he did it on his end. So he fixed mine, right? So like now it's there permanently?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't be responsible for what Mike Rand did to your display.
So
name.
like anytime I do a Zoomer now, is it going to come up?
Yes, a Zoomer. Yes, anytime you do a Zoomer, Boomer Sooner, you will be Football Across Minnesota. Unless when you enter the studio, the display name, you can change it yourself. But don't do that now.
Okay.
Because you've got to go. You've got to work on a project.
Yeah.
I think he's more technology savvy now that he's got his gaming headset on.
I know.
Well, I did. I went to
his audio quality.
Amazing.
Folks, we're trying with Chip's audio quality, and he's trying because he went to Best Buy and bought this bad boy. He's dedicated monetarily now as well as time-wise to this podcast.
He's invested.
Somebody told me I look like an assistant coach that I need to hold up my
You definitely do. There it is. Shit. I love it. So congratulations on finding Peacock. And I also want to offer to Chip my condolences on missing the Coy Parrish breakout game. You were able to see it on Peacock, but Burnsy, how quickly did I text the group after the interception and say, I can't believe Chip is not here to see this. It was just devastating to me that of all, because people were pumped, right? The crowd knows who number 3 is. Even when he made a special teams tackle earlier in the game, public address announcer announced who made the tackle, and the place went nuts for a game against Rhode Island. So condolences, Chip, that you weren't able to be there for it.
Yeah.
Burnsy, did you have the same feeling that I did when Coy got that interception?
Well, between your text and the amount of tweets I got saying, I bet you Chip is just sitting there. Somebody sent me like Scrooge McDuck just rubbing his hands together when Coy comes down with the tipped interception. Yeah, Chip, it was an interesting day in the press box because essentially no one normally was there. We had Andy Greeter was getting pitch hit for. Randy Johnson was. Dave Campbell was. I'm telling you,
okay.
The North Carolina game versus the Rhode Island game
took it out of
very,
us.
Very different in that press box.
It took the wind out of our sails. Yeah. I got a number of those texts and tweets too, and I'll reiterate from day one. I know he's new to campus. I know he was hurt. I know it was Rhode Island, but he looked pretty good on that punt return, guys.
Yeah,
just make the change. Just make the change.
They have to now. I mean, because they have, and we'll talk about the game here in a second. But obviously, Redding's injured. But even if he was healthy, like you need to make the change, I think. And you don't want Daniel Jackson out there getting blasted unnecessarily. So to me, there's no reason why he shouldn't be back there for kickoffs if it's with Tyler Nubin, but certainly with punting. Jordan Nubin. I'll get that right by the end of the year, hopefully. There's no reason at this point that he doesn't just because he can impact the game that way, even if it's for a 15-yard return. Burnsy, how would your heart flutter if they just picked up an extra first down with the return because Coy Parrish is back there?
I think we've learned, fellas, that the assumption of rational coaching with special teams just is completely thrown out the window. Have we learned nothing about this group through now 8 years where Quentin Redding goes down, and I posted about this on Gopher Illustrated yesterday. I don't think he's going to be back anytime soon from what I've heard.
No.
Now, Fleck refuses to talk about injuries because he's PJ Fleck.
Did you ask him for a Quentin Redding
ahead of time?
Did you ask him for a Quentin Redding update?
Just no. For the media does not ask PJ Fleck for any injury updates anymore, which is frustrating for fans to hear, I'm sure. But there's just no point because we know we're not going to get a straight answer.
It's true.
I'd love to get a straight answer, but that's where I'm telling you, I don't expect Quentin Redding back anytime soon. And if that's the case, to Gaardsy's point, Daniel Jackson is way too valuable to be throwing back there on a punt return. Which, by the way, on the first punt return, that should have been a flag because he was on the field. So was Devin Williams, both wearing number 9. Should have been a flag. Should have been an automatic first down for Rhode Island. But I would absolutely throw Coy Parrish back there. But what I think they will do is probably not throw Coy Parrish back there because this is special teams. I'd throw him back there on kick return, but we saw Lemecki Brockington fill in for Q Redding as well. So,
which I also wouldn't do. I also wouldn't put maybe your second or third best wide receiver back there. There's just no reason. When you have a guy that you're trying to ease in, it's such an easy way. But, Burnsy, I've heard you say the rational thinking bit like 50 times in the last 3 weeks, and it still makes me laugh. It still makes me laugh when you're playing the hits. It still cracks me up.
There's a lot of things that you'd think it's the simplest path from point A to point B. Has it ever been that way for Gopher special teams at any point in the Fleck era? No. So the assumption that they're going to make the rational choice, which is to throw Coy Parrish back there, who Minnesota implements a dime type of package defensively, which puts Coy Parrish on the field. They debuted that last week. Yeah, I'd throw the kid who's playing 10 to 15 snaps a game back there and has no other role other than a starting receiver on the flip side of it. That are my options. So we'll see what Fleck decides to do against Nevada.
All right. It was a bizarre football weekend, I think, for Minnesota. If I was the writer of Football Across Minnesota, oh, wait, he's right there. I see him.
There is a part in there.
The bizarreness of it was all of a sudden the Minnesota Vikings are ground and pound with Aaron Jones, and the Minnesota Gophers are air raid, or whatever we want to call it, with Max Brosmer and eventually Drake Lindsey. We asked for it, Burnsy and Chip. We demanded it. We wanted to see it. I told you last week, I think they wanted to throw more against North Carolina. Things just got weird. They didn't have the ball for a quarter. They did drop back 30 times. They just couldn't protect anybody. But so after a slow start again by the offensive line, which we'll get to, Brosmer could pretty much name his throw and name whatever he wanted. And what I loved about it was that even when they got up 17 or 24, they didn't stop. The game was over, and they didn't stop. They kept nurturing it. Obviously, opponent is factored in there. We all understand who Rhode Island is and who they're not, but we have seen this so many times go the opposite way. And I just left Huntington Bank Stadium like, that's why Max Brosmer's here. Exactly what he did. Keep doing this and do it against this Nevada team this weekend as well.
Yeah, and there is a section in Football Across Minnesota how things got turned upside down because one team threw it, one team ran. When PJ floated the idea of a 70% completion percentage in training camp, I think we saw what he meant on Saturday with the rhythm passing, the quick hitting, get the ball out of his hands, spread the ball around. Was it 9 different players were targeted at least 3 times? 9 different players had at least 2 catches. This is what you want PJ to do. And I can't remember a more overmatched opponent that I've seen the Gophers play. I mean, that they could have played till Thursday and Rhode Island was not going to score on their defense. But I love the fact that they let Max Brosmer build some trust with his and rhythm with his receivers and not just one receiver. I mean, he spread it around. And the fact that they called 6 straight passes, I almost killed over from a heart attack.
In the third quarter, right?
No, start the second quarter.
Second quarter, that's right.
In that drive, Yep. That's what you have to do. Now, when you face better competition, it's going to be tougher sledding, and you're probably not going to be able to do it. But this is the time to work on it. And I keep using the light switch analogy. For years past, they acted like it was a light switch when they'd get into a situation and they haven't nurtured it and haven't developed a passing game. well, we got to convert here on 3rd and 5. We need a pass. It doesn't work that way. I think you saw a quarterback really settle in and find his footing and feel good about the offense. I just thought it was. I'm glad they did it. It was a smart move. I agree with you, Garzi. I would do it again Saturday against Nevada, so you can go into Iowa feeling really good about your passing game. Now, Burns, we will need to talk about the running game and the offensive line, but in terms of Brosmer, I thought he looked really sharp.
Burns, let me kick it to you this way. My quick count before you joined me on Gopher Football Sunday, I just went through the play-by-play. I'm pretty sure they threw on first down 16 times. It's somewhere in there, like 14, 15, or 16 times, which is mind-blowing. Like if you just woke up after the last decade plus, going all the way back to Mace, really.
Yeah.
And the Gopher team threw it 16 times. Like I said, give or take a spot. That to me was what was nice, is that's how they decided they're going to dictate and move the ball.
So do we still want to fire Greg Harbaugh fan base? Is that the deal after we just watched Max Brosmer finally throw? PJ Fleck finally allow them to throw against an FCS opponent? Do we still want to fire him? Or are we all now good on that train until Iowa, when Iowa looks good defensively? But, Chip, I tell you, if you're hoping that they throw it around this weekend, the opposing 3 opponents against Nevada drop back 40 times in every game.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see Minnesota drop back a little bit, but it was good to see them actually work on it. I mean, how many times have we talked about it? We talked about it last week. We talk about it every week. Work on the passing game, and then once you get into Big Ten play, you can be able to hopefully go to it. Now, the running game is a whole separate issue, but I mean, that first drive of the second quarter, that first play specifically, 3rd and 9, it's a place they've been terrible for years. Finds Jamison Gears, completes it to 6 different receivers on that drive to then score the touchdown with Darius Taylor. It's the way it's supposed to look. That's the way they thought it was going to look with Max Brosmer, who I just think he didn't let the moment get too big like he did a little bit to start that North Carolina game where he was jittery. I think he's more used to the 11 a.m. kickoff against Rhode Island than he was the 7 p.m. against North Carolina. So he's going to have another opportunity under the lights in a couple of weeks. But that's the way they were anticipating it looking, where he's very good in the short to intermediate game, or even 9 receptions by Gopher running backs, boys. I mean, Marcus Major and Darius Taylor had 4 each. That's an element of the passing game we haven't seen where, okay, I'm going to look down the field, first, second read, check it down. And guess what? They were really adept at checking it down, where Marcus Major has 4 receptions for 21 yards. Darius Taylor has 48 yards on his 4 receptions. Instead of 2nd and 10, and when you force a ball, if you can check it down and it's 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4, like they do in the NFL constantly, and that's one of the things Brosmer talked about after the game, it's a lot easier for Harbaugh and that play sheet to continue to keep rolling.
Yeah, one thing why you need to nurture it is because, and this is the nitpick, I mean, they had 3 drops. I mean, the Brockington one
had 5 drops.
Or 5.
But there's 3.
The 3, agreed,
Brockington was the most egregious one.
That's the most egregious.
It was a little underthrown, but it was right there.
It's
right hit him directly in the chest.
You got to catch. And you can get away with that against Rhode Island, but when you're facing Iowa and these Big Ten teams, like these receivers need these reps too. As much as Brosmer does, these receivers need these reps and to be in these situations where you're not going to get away with, like that could decide a game against Iowa, a drop right there, right? It's not going to decide against Rhode Island, but that could decide to swing a game. And so that's why I'm glad PJ didn't say, run the ball. We had a drop. Let's run the ball. He said, no, we're going to stick with it. And I think we counted 38 dropbacks between the 2 quarterbacks. That was good to see. And so, but I think as much as anything, these receivers need the reps too. I mean, Driver, that would have been a tough catch in the end zone.
It should have been a catch. And by the way,
should have been a catch. Yeah.
It's second down in the red zone, out of a timeout, and guess what? They threw it at the end zone, which is 20 minutes of discussion on this podcast last week. So Brosmer drops a dime, and Driver has it hit him in the hands. It's got to be a catch.
It was such a great throw. It was a great throw. I was standing right on the goal line there, and it was such a great throw. And he just kind of he mistimed his steps or something. He couldn't. I think he just got a little twisted up. But you mentioned that possession, Burnsy. That I thought was another sign that they're at least understanding what everybody's been screaming to the ether. One of Burnsy's favorite phrases. They get the strip sack right before halftime. There's a minute 14. how many times have we seen 3 runs and a field goal for eternity?
That's right.
And again, it's such a perfect low leverage, non-stressful. You're going to win the game. Everybody there, Rhode Island knows you're going to win the game. Yes, you could. If it's Iowa, maybe you play it safer because you need a field goal. I would still do what they did. But the fact that they dropped back 3 times and lost 1,000,000 yards, that was the greatest field goal attempt in Golden Gopher history. Like, because of what preceded it, because they were working on we got a gift. Let's go for the jugular. Whether it's Rhode Island or whoever, we got to get in the mindset of attacking there. I was so elated as I saw Max Brosmer get sacked and lose 72 yards and basically put him in a really because it was just, it's what we've been clamoring for. It was maybe my favorite drive of the game. And that's only a little bit of hyperbole.
Well, and that's where PJ has to realize, stick with it. The more he's in this situation, he sees his players come through where Brosmer sticks that ball in there to Driver, even though it's incomplete. It's like, that's the right approach. Like, foot on the gas, right? Because when you are later in the season and you are facing better competition, you can fall back on, hey, we were in this situation earlier. We've nurtured the pass game. We feel good about this receiver, that receiver. I love the entire mentality, because we've seen so many of those games where he just does enough to get whatever the score is, win, get out of there, move on to the next game, and it backfires later in the season when you have to have a passing game.
Nice to also, like you say, get the receivers. It seems like they have some different options and some interesting options, like guys that are good enough to make enough plays besides Daniel Jackson, including the tight ends who made some nice catches there. And I like the fact that both backs can catch too. Darius, the one where Brosmer kind of sidearmed it because he was under pressure. Like that was just
sweet.
He just made that look like a supernatural, easy catch, right? He's a wide receiver in high school. It makes sense, but Darius is just there. I'm just going to catch it, and I got you. Like, check it down to me. I'm going to catch. After watching a decade of Adrian Peterson make a meal out of trying to catch a ball out of the backfield, like just to watch Darius just grab it like he was Daniel Jackson was good. Anything else offensively you guys want to touch on? We got a lot to get to today outside of Gopher stuff.
The offensive
line.
There we go.
Offensive line. Yeah.
Yeah, they're
what's your level of concern there? Because it just hasn't been. I mean, the starts, I think both games they kind of settled in a little bit as the game went on, but the starts were just it's just concerning. They just haven't lived up to what we thought. I thought that was going to be the strength of the team. Like, they're offensive.
You mean everybody in between, dude.
And they just haven't played well, I don't think.
They got to figure out what their best 5 is. And you started to see them make some personnel changes this weekend, what was your favorite Quinn Carroll at right guard moment when that poor guy, I mean, he's started the last 2 years at right tackle because he had to for the betterment of the team because they didn't have a better option. He reps exclusively at right guard for 8 months at every practice the media's at. And then after one game of Martez Lewis at right tackle, they burn it all down, put him back out there. Martez Lewis then slides inside back to right guard where he started every game last year. He gets benched after 2 series. And now Ashton Beers is now your right guard, probably going forward, which I probably agree with. But they got to figure it out. They are too talented as a unit and too experienced with, Ariante Ursary has got to show up, by the way, the future top 60 overall draft pick at left tackle. He might have cost himself a first-round grade. But the way he played against Rhode Island, he just seemed disinterested at times.
Kuiper coming down with the hammer.
Like
week 2,
they have to be better. Like we're talking about against Rhode Island, Darius Taylor and Marcus Major run it 21 times for 76 yards. And I know Fleck is trying to talk about how they're +2 in the box, aka there's 7 Gopher blockers and there's 9 people on the opposing side, so somebody's running free. So you're going to want to throw it if that's the case, but they have to get more knockback. They have to stop having these missed assignments. I mean, if we didn't have historical data that Brian Callahan offensive line starts slow, and it was interesting to hear Fleck say yesterday that he thinks this 2024 O-line is similar to the 2019 one. Well, you remember they rotated Connor Olson and John Michael Schmitz at center. They rotated Blaze Andrews at a multitude of spots. That was Curtis Dunlap and Daniel Faalele on the right side. I mean, if you're going to be rotating guys, I mean, okay, but I'd like to see Phillip Daniels get a shot over Martez Lewis at this point if we're going to be rotating, or Tony Nelson, something like that. But they got to figure it out up front, because you can't have 21 carries against an unranked FCS opponent and only have your tailbacks get 76 yards.
Yeah, we just haven't. I mean, if you look at that game, I thought the Gophers' defensive line just overwhelmed Rhode Island's offensive line. I thought conversely the same thing would happen. I thought their big veteran offensive line would just overwhelm Rhode Island. You didn't see them maul them. I mean, it did. They were just kind of
that line was very small too, like very very small. Their defensive line, which is a challenge in of itself, which they probably are not used to. But because we've seen Burnsy, I know you've talked about it. We've seen that happen before, where they struggle with the really small defensive lines. Their O-line, Rhode Island's, I think, was pretty big, like relative to the Gophers. D-line was not the case. They were very, very tiny.
They were undersized. And so I don't think it's a talent thing. I just think they just haven't found their stride yet, and they're just not sharp enough yet and cohesive enough. And to your point, Burns, you probably just have to figure out, okay, who's your best five right now? And Fleck talked about it. They couldn't determine that throughout fall camp, right? They weren't really.
No one ran away with right tackle, which is why they had to do what they did. Yeah, and that's where I asked him yesterday, what do you want to learn before Big Ten play? And he gave me the coach speak answer. And then he was like, well, offensive line, we got to figure it out. And again, to his point, they have one game left before you get Iowa's creatures on the D-line, Michigan's, and then USC's. I mean, that is 3 of the top 20 defensive lines in college football, in my opinion. So it's not going to get any easier. And yes, opposing defenses are doing a lot of stunts and twists. They're moving the picture on the offensive line right before the snap. They're facing some difficult things, but you have a 5th-year guy at left tackle, a 5th-year guy at right tackle. Tyler Cooper's a senior. You have to be able to start to figure these things out. And so, yeah, Minnesota loves to run zone. Maybe if I'm them, I mix in a little bit more gap, which is pulling guys. You don't have to always have the fastest foot speed then. But you got to try something different this weekend, because this offensive line has to find a little confidence before the creatures that are going to be coming against them these next few weeks.
I do wonder if they will not go back to what they was, but I do wonder if they'll make a concerted effort Saturday to, hey, we got to get this running game going and get it established before we go into Big Ten play. So maybe they will, as much like we saw the passing game be an emphasis, I wonder if that's an emphasis to try to be physical and get that, even though they traditionally, they know they can run the ball, they've been good at it.
Yeah.
That they have confidence that they can do it. But I just don't think they need to get that line squared away with who they want to go with, what positions they're going to be playing, and start to establish some cohesion and chemistry as they go into because guess what? All the things that Fleck's saying is stunts and different twists and all that thing. Or you think Iowa's not going to do creative things?
Exactly.
They might
with better athletes. So I don't know if it's full blown panic, but it's just it just hasn't been up to what we thought it was going to be through the 2 games.
Anything else, Burnsy, that you want to get off your chest?
Well, I tell you, if they're going to work on the run game, they're going to have a defensive effort that allows them to, because if the defense plays the way they did against Rhode Island, you're going to have an opportunity to work on the run game. I mean, the defense looked the way they should look against an FCS opponent, unless you guys thought otherwise.
No, I texted you guys the quarterback play for Rhode Island. I don't know that he had much chance because the line just got overwhelmed.
Yep.
I mean, their quarterback was just played 2, but they were just throwing it to wherever, just trying to get rid of the ball.
Well, they refused to just hang on to the ball. They refused to.
And they had no chance.
Yeah.
They had. But I thought, they obviously creating turnovers is great. I don't know if you can live by that, but I thought they swarmed. They obviously tackled a lot better than they did week 1. They cleaned that up. That's probably the biggest takeaway for me is that they
22 missed tackles against North Carolina. The starters only had 3 last week.
Yeah.
Right. Which they should against Rhode Island, right? Mm-hmm. They should. There shouldn't be. It shouldn't be a high number. That should be. In a perfect world, you flip the 2 games that they had. You start with a Rhode Island and you build up to a North Carolina. In a perfect world, but they don't do that because of all the time. They've got the Thursday game. They've got scheduling issues. They've got things. Like that's the other thing I left. It's like be nice. That's a nice warm up. That's a nice preseason game. Even you see first weekend in the NFL. I mean, there's penalties all over the place.
Yeah.
quarterbacks are playing poorly, and a lot of the analysts are like, well, no one plays preseason anymore. They do the practices and they do the joint stuff, but nobody plays preseason, and that does, I think, have a little bit of an effect. I'm not going to say it's every reason why there was some sloppy play, but there's a lot of stuff that you just want to clean up, and sometimes it takes a nice 48 rip against an FCS team to get your mind right and to get everything the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I thought Anthony Smith played really well.
He was a monster.
Yeah. He had
even look at the stat line.
Yeah, 7 pressures. I mean, you think of Jack Henderson's pick 6, he can give some flowers to Anthony Smith for forcing that errant throw. Coy Parrich's interception, it's Anthony Smith on the pressure. Cody Lindenberg tips it up in the air, and Coy snatches it. And they had 4 turnovers on the day. They could have had 7.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of opportunities around the ball, but I even think they're able to stop the run. You're able to then get off the field on 3rd down. I think they were 2 of 9 against the starters. Rhode Island was. Turns out when you have 9 different 3rd downs against you, when the average distance to go is 11 yards, it's going to be really tough for a CAA opponent against a Big Ten defense to do much. So, that's what you wanted to see from the Gopher defense. You cleaned up your tackling. You cleaned up the sloppiness. Now you're going to have a step up in competition this weekend when Nevada comes to town, because I think that's at least a competent offense. It's certainly one that is going to challenge them in some different areas compared to what they've seen. But, I mean, when you're able to have a defensive score, 4 turnovers, stop the run, that's what you wanted to see.
It's hard to know off TV who they have on the back end. And I know because of the score, they were playing a lot of guys, so it's probably not a true indication. But are they starting to zero in on their safety rotation and who's going to be in that, or is it still kind of playing everybody?
Well, it was interesting to see Darius Green was dressed, not on the availability report, but at no point had his helmet on the sidelines. I don't know why he was listed as not out, because I don't know what the story is. So you had Aiden Gooseby play every rep at strong safety. You had Kerry Brown and Coleman Bryson split free safety. Your boy Coy Parrich got on the field when Minnesota implemented a dime package, which they went to for probably 15 snaps or so. So they're starting to put more on his plate, and he continues to eat everything on his plate. So we'll see if that role continues to change, but they're still pretty set on Kerry Brown and Coleman Bryson at free. Now we'll see if that changes this weekend against Nevada as Coy Parrich continues to just make plays. But I agree with the Coy Parrich approach. I know no one wants to agree with me on that, but he's a true freshman. All right.
Yeah.
And it's not like Kerry Brown and Coleman Bryson are unqualified to be playing the reps that they are. I mean, I think they've played pretty well themselves through 2 weeks, but you just don't want to overload him. And especially if you can give him the return gig now going forward.
That's the answer.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
That's the answer. That I told you on Sunday, Burnsy, that's like a side salad. You love the plate analogy. That's not the Jack's Cafe. That's not the Jack's Cafe prime rib with Brussels sprouts or asparagus and then the tiramisu. That's the little wedge salad on the side. Coy can handle the wedge salad of the return game, like without any difficulty. There's no reason to go, I don't know if he can do it. He can do that. I agree with you totally on the playing in the defense, and there's things that he needs to learn there. And you have upperclassmen that have been through the program and probably do at least deserve their shot to see if they can hold him off. But the return game, I mean, come on, that's a side salad. He can eat that. He can definitely eat that.
And he's playing on all 4 special teams, right? Already is blocking kick return. He's up front line. I mean,
I trust you as the Coy Parrich biographer here.
You know my stance from day one. I would have put him back there. Okay, it wasn't day one, but I think going forward he'd be the punt return for me, and I put him back on kicks and let him try to make his mark there. And then as you gradually increase his workload on defense, however long that takes, it takes. But I think he can make a big impact on special teams. Who knows? He might, return one for you and
let's not
change
go crazy.
The game.
Let's not go crazy. Let's make sure there's an AED in the Huntington Bank Stadium press box if that happens for
Burnsy chest
the paddles. Yeah, exactly.
It's not legal in this program. It's not to have a long return. So that's where when Coy took 128 yards, I was like, well, Fleck's going to take him off now because that's not legal in this program.
All right, we'll take a break so Burnsy can reset himself to talk about some other things around the Big Ten. It was an interesting weekend in the Big Ten. Some interesting games coming up this week as well. And we'll preview the Nevada Wolfpack coming to Huntington Bank Stadium when we come back here on the Pair and a Spare podcast. we need to spend a minute to talk about Jack's Cafe, our longtime partner now. I think 3 years-ish, we can say longtime partner and outstanding friend, not only to the three of us, but to our audience. And last week, Bill didn't even say anything, the owner of Jack's Cafe. Sometimes he'll say, hey, I want to do a ticket giveaway. Think we can pull it off, whatever. I just woke up on like Monday morning with 2 tickets and great parking to the Rhode Island game. Nothing. It was like Santa just dropped them off. Burnsy always does a great job of finding the winner. And our winner this week, Caleb, love it that he took his daughter to their first game. It's a perfect Rhode Island game. Cool. A perfect game for kids. Early kickoff. Took his daughter there. The seats are in the end zone, which is a perfect vantage point for the kids. My kids have sat there from time to time over the years. They love it because you're close. You've got the basically the spot behind in the open area where you can run around and go on the little field and do whatever you want to do. And that's just the kind of people Jack's Cafe made a lifetime memory for that dad and hopefully that daughter. And that's just one of the reasons why we love working with them, because they get it.
Well, Bill's classy. I mean, he's first class all the way. And he does this how many times each season where he's giving tickets away for this podcast for listeners. And thanks, Caleb, for being a listener, a loyal listener. And thanks for taking your daughter. I'm sure that was a fun dad-daughter day out. Great weather, right?
Yep.
A day at the football game. We always talk about the food, the parking, all that, but Bill is one of the nicest men you'll ever meet. Great Gopher fan, great college football fan, just a first-class individual. So I really appreciate that he does this for our podcast and our listeners.
So if you want to support him the way he supports us, you can go to Jack's Cafe for whether it's a date night, brunch. I mean, we are in prime brunch season here coming up here, boys. And that patio is the best in Minneapolis, and I will say that bar none. So go to jackscafe.com, make your reservations for whatever it may be, or you can just stroll up to the bar. That bar is a great place to watch a game, get a drink with a coworker or a friend, but it is jackscafe.com. How do you spell it, Guardsy?
That's jaxcafe.com, Burnsy. jaxcafe.com. The Nevada Wolfpack, an interesting team. They're 1-2. They hung with SMU. They dominated Georgia Southern. I was watching a little bit of that game because the Mountain West Conference partners with True TV, so you can lock in. And I was watching.
So after Cops, you put on Mountain West games.
So after
that is a man dedicated to his job, right there.
Well, hey, we're the Pair to Spare podcast. I'm the sideline reporter. I'm the host of the PJ Fleck radio and TV show. I'm locked in on the Nevada Wolfpack. Here's what I can tell you. I've only watched about a half. They put up like 700 yards offensively against Georgia Southern. I was watching it, and they were moving the ball pretty well. And then I looked, did they win this game? No, they lost 20-17. Part of the reason they lost, they had 1 million penalties, including some personal foul calls, including one where Caden Johnson, Minneapolis kid, who's trying to come home after playing at Wisconsin, like injured his elbow. He's questionable. Like, it's so their coach, Jeff Choate, I think his name is, from Texas. He came over from Texas. He spent most of his press conference yesterday basically going, I mean, I told him, like, we got to stop this. I mean, they had 15 penalties, a bunch of personal fouls. At least one of them led directly to a Georgia Southern touchdown. So I think people look – that whole preamble is this is a pretty solid team. Like, they've got experience at quarterback, a lot of experience at wide receiver, a lot of experience at running back. They've got 58 new players, I think the number was. Like, it's a wild deal. Like, I don't think it's going to be Rhode Island coming in here. And literally the reason they lost last week is because they couldn't stop getting personal foul penalties, which their head coach is just furious about.
I'm just looking it up right now. They are the most penalized team in major college football.
Now, they've also played one more game than 95% of people.
They had a week
They're
0.
Still averaging about 10 penalties a game.
Yeah, that is. They're averaging, excuse me, almost 10.
By the way, the first offensive drive took like 40 minutes. I was watching it, but that was because Georgia Southern couldn't stop jumping off sides. The first drive, there was like 7 penalties. I'm like, oh, True TV, you're killing me. You're killing me, True TV.
Yeah, being able to lose a game in which your offense runs 87 plays,
right?
87 plays,
right.
And you only put up 17 points is something to behold.
Yeah,
that takes effort.
I think a lot of fans will remember the new quarterback for the Nevada Wolfpack back to that 2021 Gophers versus Colorado game.
Yeah,
when they faced Brendan Lewis back at Colorado. Now, he is a very different player than he was 3-4 years ago, but this is going to be a tricky offense, and Brendan Lewis is going to be the best quarterback they've played so far. It's a lot of shotgun. It's shotgun option. It's shotgun. I mean, this is a kid that's going to want to run the football. He's their leading rusher. He's rushed for 18 times in multiple games. He's got 16 first downs with his legs. It's an offense that's converting over 50% of their third downs. So, I mean, it's a competent team coming in. Nevada was dreadful, absolutely pitiful the last couple of years. In this coaching job that Jeff Choate has done, I understand they've been very penalized. They should have won that SMU game in the opener. They should have won last week. They should be 3-0 coming into this game.
Yep.
But it's a much improved team from a couple of years ago, from last year. And Minnesota's going to – I think they're a 2-touchdown favorite right now via Vegas. But
it started at 11 and jumped up to like 16 really quickly.
Well, that's what
I read.
The Caden Johnson news will do. Again, Minnehaha kids, they can swing the line 5 points. Chip, Mr. Football across America would tell you that.
That's right. Yeah, this is going to be in between their first two games, right? They're not at North Carolina's level. Obviously, they're not at Rhode Island's level. So, but it's still, it's obviously a game you should take, handle your business. You should, I think, defensively, I think
you just got to be disciplined this week.
I think they, I think defensively they cleaned up.
Going to throw option at you, which
right.
I mean, they'll go 5 wide. They'll go shotgun, full house, triple option type of style at you. It's something where you just got to be disciplined. And then offensively, I mentioned it earlier, Nevada has seen 40 dropbacks, I believe, in every single one of their games. So this is another game where I think Minnesota's going to have to throw the football. But you just have to show up and play well. Again, Nevada wants to take the air out of the ball a little bit. That's how you run 87 plays and only score 17 points a week ago. I don't think there's going to be a ton of possessions in this game. So what you do have for possessions, you have to make the most of.
And if they're being sloppy with penalties and stuff, don't get involved in,
right.
Play a clean game.
Right.
Finish tackles, be disciplined, be fundamentally sound, and just, continue what you built last week in terms of, tackling crisply, your offense finding a rhythm early, in that second quarter and staying with that rhythm. So, when you said he was the quarterback that Colorado, remember how bad that Colorado offense was that day?
I sure do.
They could not do anything. It was unbelievable.
That was a shutout, I think, or a near shutout.
That was 4
They
years
scored
ago
late,
now.
right? Or I just remember how two things about that. Gopher fans traveled like crazy to that one.
Yep.
It was almost like a pro Gopher crowd. And then just how much the Gophers defense overwhelmed that Colorado offense that day.
What's different about 2024? I just watched a Big Ten defense overwhelm Colorado's offense last week. What do you mean?
And there's a heck of a transition, Bernie. It's like you're a podcaster. You've got a face for radio and a body for podcasting and a mind for podcasting as well.
I'm out here catching strays with some of these analogies, but go on.
Let's talk about that game. No surprise that Nebraska is now ranked because they're the Indiana basketball of college football. The second that
one good win,
one good win, and they're back. And I don't think there's 100 Nebraska writers that vote in the AP poll. Maybe there are, but everybody wants Nebraska to be good, right? I mean, you see it.
Nostalgia.
We all love Tom Osborne. Tommy Frazier. Go down the list. I mean, we all. Trev Alberts, your guy, Chip. Yep. We all everybody wants to see it, right? And they take this Colorado thing, man, that the Colorado thing's hilarious because it's gone from just an amazing, fun, cool story to now everybody's mad. There's, Shador is basically saying, well, Dylan Raiola never gets touched. What do you want? Just throwing his offensive lineman under the bus. There's rumors that Dion has told the Colorado band, don't play the fight song after Sanders touchdowns because we want to play his rap song. I don't know if that's true, but it's believable. It's definitely believable. And Nebraska, on the other hand, is just going about their business and might have the next Patrick Mahomes. And not just because he literally looks like Patrick Mahomes, he can play pretty well, too, in their true freshman quarterback.
The $2 million man looked pretty good, Chipper.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the Nebraska coach is a good coach. Like, I think
he's a stud. He's a total stud.
He's won, he didn't win in the NFL. Obviously, he's won at the college level. He's a very good coach. It's not surprising he's going to get that thing turned around. But, yeah, I called it a good win. I don't even know if it's a good win because I think Colorado's terrible.
Right. Just the way they did it is, that's a sign of a pretty solid team, I think. But go ahead.
Yeah, but they did what they were supposed to do, and they jumped on them. And I, I don't think it's with Nebraska. I don't really know if it's always been a talent issue. They always self-destructed at kind of the worst possible times too. When you think about all the close losses they had or whatever, I think they're probably a little more disciplined now. Quarterback obviously has some potential there to be really good. He was a highly rated guy. So they were one of the few Big Ten teams that really put their foot on the gas this weekend. There's a lot of kind of close games where, you look at Penn State or obviously
Penn State,
Michigan got run out of their own building. There were just some games where
we'll talk about Iowa in a second.
I thought that would be a blowout, but that's, it's still early in the season, so maybe teams are still trying to figure out who they are and what they want to be.
I still don't think we know how good Nebraska will be until they hit the back half of that schedule, because you look at their upcoming games. They got Northern Iowa this weekend, who was losing to St. Thomas in the fourth quarter before ended up coming up. And then Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana. I mean, those are games I'm going to imagine they're going to be favored in.
Illinois just knocked off a ranked Kansas team, though.
They did. I mean, we're going to find out a lot about Illinois yet. But that back half of the schedule, we got road games against Ohio State, USC, and Iowa, with home games against Wisconsin and UCLA. But, I mean, I thought that they were going to win because Nebraska is much, much better in the trenches, and they asserted that dominance from the opening whistle, and then they just kind of plateaued after they got the 3-score lead. But it's going to be interesting to see. So say Nebraska goes 8-4. Which first bowl game since 2017 at that point?
Just preposterous that
I
you
know.
see everything that goes on there. We say it every year, but you look at what was going on there Saturday night and what's happened and the crowd and the support and the money, and you go, they have the longest bowl drought in FBS right now, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. That's absurd. Yeah. It's absurd. It should never happen.
It should never happen, but reality, as you often say, the truth cannot be controversial.
That's right.
So it's exciting to see something different, and something different is Nebraska being good. As someone who is now in their early 30s, I don't have a lot of recollections of Nebraska being great.
Yeah,
like some other members of the podcast do.
Yeah.
I have vague memories of watching them play against Florida State and all those in the 90s. I have vague recollections.
Well, I'm the old guy who knows when they were the kind of one of the programs, and not to do a pro Nebraska thing, but when you walk into their facilities and they have that, I know they do tours of it. Have you gone through it, Garzy, when you've been there?
No, you great. Give such a vivid description. I feel like I don't need to.
Yeah, but you go in there
like 50 times.
The Heisman room, I just love it. Like they have interactive things, and like the Heisman comes out from the walls. Like that's pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean it's. We joke about it that, they're going to be ranked in the top 25 every year preseason, no matter what happens, whether it's legit or not. But it is kind of fun when they are good because of particularly people of my age that just understand what that program has been. You kind of want to see that return to it.
Yeah, and Rule, like I said, is a stud. I mean, he puts out a lot of they put out a lot of videos of him coaching the team, and like if you like coaching at all, which Chip, I do. Yeah. And the messages that you send and stuff. First of all, it's funny because if you just read the transcript, a lot of it's PJ Fleck, but because it's not PJ Fleck, everyone's like, "Ooh, great!"
Yeah,
it's like, "Wow, this is me." So they're very similar. I think that's why the two of them get along pretty well. But he's just a stud, man. I mean, he's just. It was a great hire by them. Finally, a guy who actually has some substance behind him and can put together a program, and I think kind of gets the whole big picture. All right. Iowa State. You were right, Burnsy. I underestimated how much football I'd actually be able to watch after the 11 o'clock kick. My kids were kind of just playing outside. They really wanted nothing to do with me. So I said, fine, I'm going to watch college football then. If you don't want to be with your dad, then I'm going to go do something I want to do. And my wife was doing some stuff. So I watched most of that second half of the Cyhawk game when it turned dramatically. Thanks to the, I think, not $1 million quarterback, but certainly $100,000s of dollars quarterback that you also got suspended for if you're Kirk Ferentz for tampering in the portal. Cade McNamara throws an egregious pick while they're up, I think at that time, 13-0. That let Iowa State back into the game. And the Cyclones from that point on did something that not a lot of teams can do. They came back and pretty much dominated against Iowa in that second half.
Yeah, I watched that whole game, and I think the game was lost in the first half when Iowa, I think, twice had it inside the 10, maybe inside the 5. And typical Iowa, they kick field goals. You know, you can win, and Kirk Ferentz has won that way, but, you know, I thought Iowa State, they had a quarterback that can make some plays and some receivers that can make some plays on them. And the Iowa's defense had some uncharacteristic busts that you don't really see from them a lot. And so,
you know why you don't see that from them a lot? And I'll die on this.
The offenses that
no, because no one ever tries. I'll say it again forever.
Yeah.
You have to take shots against Iowa. They want you to just keep everything in front, and they're going to play to the sides. Like, I don't understand this. I get it that you're risking an interception because every time it gets deflected, it seems like Cooper DeJean or Sebastian Castro or Bob Sanders or Chad Greenway is going to grab it.
Yeah.
But it's like, why did Purdue, who couldn't beat the Gophers in the Jeff Brom era, why did Purdue beat them every year? Because they threw the ball a lot, over and over.
They're aggressive.
Again.
They stayed aggressive.
Go ahead. But Iowa State took a couple of shots and make them have a mistake back there. Don't let them just read your keys and here's the run and blah, blah, blah. They had like multiple blown coverages that were really easy touchdowns. Sorry.
Yeah.
But it just bothers me.
You're right.
Like,
you're right.
Take chances. It's okay.
Well, you get lulled into that. Oh, we better play it safe. We better,
Right. And you got to play perfect. You don't have to play perfect.
Matt Campbell didn't do that. And it was one of those games that you could see. We've seen a million times where it starts to pivot and then it keeps going. And you're like, man, this is going to end this way. I still thought after when Iowa State took that ball over, I don't know where they're at in their territory, but I thought, Iowa's going to make a stop. This is going to be it. They kind of had their chance. But give the kid credit. It was a 54-yard field goal, a freshman playing his first game. He hit it right down the middle. I mean, right down the middle.
It was great.
And selfishly from a personal standpoint, my son was down there, his first Cyhawk game. He wasn't in the stadium, but he made it out alive. We talked to him. I did text him. I said, be careful because Iowa fans are probably going to be angry. So don't, just be smart. But it was his first Cyhawk experience and being in Iowa City and he said there was a ton of Iowa State fans there. I would like to be able to take in that environment because I love rivalry games and just kind of.
Yeah, it's a good one.
To be there, and even if you don't get tickets, just to be in the town to kind of see what it's like. But Iowa State really impressed me in the second half. The way they just kept battling and didn't just kind of play into the way Iowa wanted that game to go.
To your point, Chip, Iowa had it first and goal at the 1, kicked a field goal, first and goal at the 3, and kicked a field goal.
Yeah, it was inside 5.
Yeah. Holy cow! Like,
there was a lot. There was a lot going.
That's your game there. That's your game.
Yeah, but think about you're down 13-0 in the second half in Iowa City, and you're able to come back and get the win. I mean, I know it is. There's a lot of desperate fans down there in Iowa City now that they've seen the same thing again. I'm going to be very curious to see for what Gaardsy has now built, and I agree with, the drunkest game in Huntington Bank Stadium history next weekend at 6:30 p.m. on NBC.
I'm not looking forward to it.
Those tailgates are opening. Tailgate lots open at 12:30, Gaardsy. It is going to be – look, this looks like a beatable team, especially if I'm going to be curious to see if it is Brendan Sullivan, if it's Cade McNamara, because it seems to be the recipe of if you can stop – Caleb Johnson, who looked really good, the Iowa tailback, 25 carries for over 7 yards to carry.
He's a real deal.
If you can stop him, it looks like it's going to go pretty well for you if you got to force Cade McNamara to beat you. But how many times have we seen in this game? A lot of teams like Minnesota spin their tires like we've seen over and over again. But even last year, why did the Gophers beat them? Because in the second half, they came out throwing. That's how they did it. They got an explosive play. Now, they weren't able to turn scoring opportunities into touchdowns, but you can win 12-10 in that one.
Yep.
Again, college, it's so funny to watch the Iowa fans go from we're the greatest show on turf against an FCS opponent. We're going to the college football playoff to now fire Kirk Ferentz in a week. It is just college football is magical.
Well, Johnson, their tailback, he's really good. He had a great game, but But when they have to drop back and pass it, it doesn't look much different to me than what we've seen. I mean, there's just not.
So you mean to tell me the head coach might have more influence on the offense than people thought, and it wasn't all Brian Ferentz's fault?
Well, their biggest problem, honestly, and they're writing about it now, is they haven't really developed or had a decent quarterback in a while. And in guys that they've recruited,
PJ Beathard?
Beathard probably. I mean, he was on the Rose Bowl team. I mean, there was Nate Stanley, who had a minute or two on the Vikings practice squad. I mean, Chip's old enough to remember Drew Tate. Talking about the comparisons with Drew Tate and Brian Cupido to Glenn Mason, who was mad at Chip for writing something that he didn't like. And so when Chip said, "Are there comparisons between Brian and Drew?" Mace just said, yeah, there's some comparisons. Okay, thanks, Mace. I only bring that up. Brad Banks obviously was a Heisman Trophy guy, finalist to Carson Palmer, but it took him, like we were talking to Scott Docterman about that, Burnsy, in the press box. It took them a while to even go to him. You know, he was splitting time his junior year, then his senior time, he's a Heisman guy. They just haven't, in probably the last decade, really had a QB that developed, and they identified and developed. And McNamara, came to them as kind of who he was, an older quarterback, but they've not, and the injury didn't help. But that's one of their big problems. They just haven't had good QB play.
And that's how you could be potentially wasting, which I think is one of the best defenses in the Kirk Ferentz era. And there's been a ton of good defenses. I mean, you look around that. Jay Higgins, Sebastian Castro, Xavier, Akba, Quinn Schulte. They are tremendous on the back end. Yeah, they gave up 20 points in the second half, and they were part of the reason they lost the game. But it comes back to the offense where first and goal at the 1, you get a field goal. First and goal at 3, you get a field goal.
That's rough.
That's where the game was lost. Yeah.
All right, we can't leave without two quick things. First of all, Michigan gets boat raced by Texas. I don't have anything to say except it's harder to win when you don't have a bunch of senior players that you recruited illegally during COVID and know the plays. That's all I'm going to say. Anything you guys want to add?
They got
Quinn Ewers is pretty good. Yeah.
Texas is good. Texas.
Why did Michigan part of why Michigan won? Now they also had everybody's signals, but I mean they were tremendous up front. Texas came into the big house and gave it to them. Up front.
Right.
Now Quinn Ewers looked tremendous too, but we spent a lot of time talking about quarterbacks. JJ McCarthy ain't back there to save them right now.
Right.
Now I know that he's also under pressure, but I'm going to be very curious if Davis Warren is going to be the guy when the Gophers head there in a few weeks.
When you watch that game, in a weird way, it gives me greater appreciation for Nick Saban, because look at all the guys Michigan lost to the NFL, right? They won a national title, sent a bunch of guys to the NFL. Bama did that every single year.
Right.
And we're still great. They were just as good the next year. And they'd send the next 15 guys to the NFL. And then they're great the next year. I mean, it's hard. Like, they've lost a lot of talent. And I think you saw that Saturday. I mean, Texas was just, they were a superior team. They had more talent. And I think Texas is really good.
The other thing Saban lost almost every year was at least one of his coordinators. I mean, he was losing the players, and then you just hire whatever fired head coach that was an analyst. He would just elevate, whether it was Lane or Sark or whoever it was. And then lastly, I mean, the story of college football. Former Gopher running backs coach Thomas Hammock, PJ Fleck's roommate at Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
Knocks off Notre Dame. My buddy Andy Garcia, the voice of the Huskies, with an outstanding lose your mind once in a lifetime call, which I'm so happy for him because he's the greatest guy ever that we've gotten to know he works for Westwood One as well. But how about that, boys? I mean, a week ago, the headlines, I was going to print out some headlines, but then I wanted to make sure I got my game balls behind me so Burnsy could see it. So I needed to make sure what was going on. But last week at this time, it was just write Notre Dame's name in the playoff, right? They beat Texas A&M on the road. This is a different
favored in every game. Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. And all of that was probably true, but you can write this down, guys. They don't play the games on paper. They play them on the field. And Northern Illinois found a way to get it done in South Bend. Unbelievable, especially in this day and age when you think about what's happening.
What was the line on that one?
4 touchdowns. It was a 28-point home favorite.
Ooh, boy. Ooh. And you probably had to pay them a ton of money to come there.
It was over $1 million. It was definitely.
That is getting, I think, 1.2 to come to Minneapolis this weekend.
That's always my favorite, when you have to pay a team over $1 million or big money. And they come in.
Yes. Jerry Kill did that to somebody, right? Wasn't it Auburn? Didn't Jerry Kill beat somebody last year? or 2 years ago, and they had to pay him $1.2 million. And Jerry brought it up.
It was New Mexico State against Auburn, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and then he brought it up. He's like, they paid us $1.2 million to kick their ass. It's like unbelievable.
So Thomas was Thomas here the last year for Mace? He was here for like 3 or 4 years, right? Because he was whole offensive coordinator 1 year, right?
I think he was. Well, I'll look
Mace
it up.
hire him? I think
he might have been a Brewster hire. I'm not sure.
Or maybe Brewster hired him.
He was supposed to be a holdover for the next staff, whoever it was. I forget. But then he went.
I thought it was Mace to Brewster, right? And then he went to. I think he was here 3 or 4 years. But
I'm going to look it up now. But you guys can talk about that.
But it was a good story from PJ yesterday about how they were college roommates. Talked about their senior season together, where Hammock got told he can't play because of a medical condition. PJ was banged up the entire season because of a hamstring deal, and apparently PJ's mother still sends Thomas Hammock notes.
Yeah,
she has a picture in the house of them calling. I think it was the senior sideline season.
Yes, the sideline.
Them just standing next to each other. But
that's awesome.
Yeah,
but
how frosted were the PJ Fleck tips? How frosted were the PJ Fleck?
Oh boy, and how spiked up with
like
the front of his hair.
Yeah, the 2003, 2004 PJ Fleck vibe. Can you imagine?
But
Hammock
it was
here 07 to 09, by the way, and then 2010. So he was fully Brewster. He was full Brewster, and then went to Wisconsin.
But what, Mace 07?
I thought Mace was 06 and got fired after the 06 season. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
3, 4, 5, 6. I thought I had 4. Okay. But how cool was that scene though, where he's in tears doing this post game interview? It's like that's why I love college football. I just genuine emotion pouring out of a coach after a huge win that literally nobody other than even their fans didn't expect them to win that game, but.
They're there to see touchdown Jesus. The fans that are there, they're there to watch their kids play. And hey, we get to go to Notre Dame. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then they walk out with 1.4 and a victory.
That's right. That's why I love college football. That's why we love college football, for moments like that, man.
Well, that's where every single week there will be a game or multiple games played that these kids are going to remember and fans will remember for the rest of their life. And that's what changes to me between college football and the NFL.
Yep.
It's just. So you never know what's going to happen. They don't play the games on paper, to Guardsy's point, and that's how you can go into South Bend as a 28-point favorite, or an underdog, I should say, and come away with an experience that you'll never forget. I mean, that is the epitome of college football, and that's what makes it so fun.
I was much more inclined to cry with Thomas Hammock than I was with Sharon Moore in Happy Valley last year. That's just me.
What was his line that just sets you off every time?
All of it. Like I said, that was my line. Like Harbaugh was in the hospital overcoming some debilitating, life-threatening disease. Like, no, he's at the University Park Sheraton and eating a sandwich and watching the game. But I want to make this about Thomas Hammock because that was great.
That's right.
I mean, but imagine though too. I mean, you saw PJ. That was like a 4-minute answer, and we're going to talk about it on the coaches show today too because it's such a great little story. That was like a 4-minute answer about. Northern Illinois and his time there and his teammate and his roommate and the mom bit. And you could just see him just light up. Like it's a lot different than availability report comes out 2 hours before the game. That's a real humanizing bit. And I just think about, imagine coaching your alma mater to that game. And people were sending out videos. There was one girl on Twitter or Instagram, whatever, that her dad played at Northern Illinois at some point, and she walked down the steps. He's by himself, just like screaming at the TV. Like he doesn't know he's being filmed, but it's just some random Northern Illinois, defensive tackle from 1999. Like that is, for all the changes in college sports, and there's a lot, and it's harder and harder, maybe not so much in football, but basketball, to kind of connect and be one with your school. It's the logos still matter. The logos still matter.
I wrote this on a preview column. It's like, for all this stuff we, never watching it again. I'm, transfer portal, NIL, all these stuff going on. It's like when Saturday comes in the fall, you still get emotionally invested in it, and you don't even think about that stuff. Like, you think anybody's talking about NIL and all that at that moment? It's like, that's why college football is still the greatest sport in the world. Like that emotion and all that we saw on that Saturday, undefeated.
That's a good way to end it. Unless you want to try to beat that, Burnsy. That's a good walk-off field. That's a 54-yard field goal by Chipper right there. You're gonna call a timeout and try to ice us?
I'm gonna call the timeout and say, what do we think of, to end it here, Badgers versus Bama, this weekend. I don't know what to think of Wisconsin so far.
I know.
Because they were trailing against Western Michigan at home to start the fourth quarter. They made it look very close against South Dakota last week in the second half.
Yep.
Bama didn't look great against South Florida last week. I think the spread is 14, 17 points, something like that. Bama is the road favorite coming into Camp Randall, but
yep.
I think we're going to learn a lot about Wisconsin this weekend to an extent. But Chip, you're the one who has sent a child to this institution, which is classic Star Tribune behavior. So what do we think of the Badgers heading into Bama?
I think Bama rolls. I don't know. I didn't see the Bama game, but obviously the score says they weren't great. I've seen bits and pieces of Wisconsin so far. They just haven't looked impressive.
Yeah,
I mean, Van Dyke has not looked. No, he's looked the way he's looked the last couple of years, in my opinion, at Miami. That's translated, not the all ACC freshman of the year bit, but it's going to be. I just don't know what to make of Wisconsin so far. I know they're 2-0, but it's not exactly two inspiring home victories there.
They've just done enough to get by. I think they haven't been sharp. Yeah. They haven't been overpowering or overwhelming. They got 2 wins. They've done some nice things, but it just hasn't really. You haven't been really impressed with them yet, so we'll see. I mean, obviously Bama. This is a huge step up for them, even though they didn't play well Saturday. But I would think Bama wins pretty easily.
That would be my hunch. I just like that I think after their Western Michigan game. So the first game of the season, I was popping in on some, I think it's Jim Polzine, Chipper, your guy, who he always goes thoughts, Badgers fans, on the game. And just, it's an interesting read. I mean, there's so many people that are out on Luke Fickell. Like after one season and one game, right? This is year 2 for Luke Fickell, unless I blacked out and missed something, right? I'm pretty sure. And I just had to laugh. I'm like, God, people are nuts. The guy's got
instant gratification, man.
He's got like a top 10 recruiting class coming in, right? At the moment, like they've recruited exceedingly well.
It's a good top 25 class.
Yeah. Yep. So he's doing well. He took Cincinnati to the college football playoff where he had to win every single game, including Notre Dame, by the way, for like 3 straight years before they finally gave him a look. I just love college football fans, especially Wisconsin, because Barry Alvarez ain't walking through that door, guys. Like this isn't the 8-game Big Ten season where you can go 8-3 and go to the Rose Bowl, and Ron Dane and all. I think it's the 25th anniversary of his Heisman. But I'm just laughing. I'm like, we're really going to put Luke Fickell on the hot seat 13 games in. Like, unbelievable. But that's college football, I suppose. Now, Badger fans will get in my feet and go, it's called having standards. Something you guys don't know about. I'm like, have another spotted cow and leave me alone. All right. Anything else we want to talk about?
Moon Man's better than Spotted Cow.
Moon Man is better than Spotted Cow.
I love Moon Man. Yeah.
Moon Man's great. Spotted Cow.
We can all agree on that. We can all
very average. Very average. All right. Follow.
Do we have
Ryan
tickets
Burns.
to give away this week, or don't we know yet?
I've not gotten the text yet, so we will let people know. Okay. Not sure. It'd be nice if Bill used his own tickets one of these days. Get to a game, Bill.
30 kickoff. If there was ever a day, 80 degrees and sunny is the day.
Yeah, it'll be good. So, follow us at the Parent and Spare podcast Twitter handle. Follow us on YouTube, the Parent and Spare YouTube channel. That's how Caleb was able to take his daughter to the game the other day. We continue to go up on YouTube, and don't forget about the pod. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, please subscribe. Please leave a rating, comment, tell a fan friend in your life about us. Burnsy can't walk from the Dodge County entrance, Chip, to my pregame spot on Oak Street without getting stopped. I was in the tunnel last week, and someone asked me what my phone was at. In the tunnel team, I told him 87%. Chip would be mortified. So we appreciate all that. We appreciate all the heckling. We appreciate you guys listening. Please tell a friend about us if they don't know about us yet. And we appreciate Jack's Cafe as well. We'll talk to you next week on the Parent and Spare podcast. Bye, everybody.